Imagine it's a random Tuesday night. You're half asleep on the couch, and you open your banking app just to check something real quick. Your rent is coming out in 2 days, your credit card balance is way higher than you thought, payday is still almost a week away, and that tiny number in your savings looks like a typo. Your stomach drops for a second, and this thought flashes through your head. I make okay money, so why am I always on the edge? If that feels a little too familiar, you're not broken. You're just playing a game where nobody gave you the rule book. Your 20s are supposed to be this fun decade of freedom and figuring yourself out. But in America, they're also the decade where tiny money mistakes quietly snowball into 10, 15, 20 years of stress. So in this video, I want to walk you through the biggest money mistakes Americans make in their 20s, why the system almost nudges you into them, and what you could do differently so future you doesn't have to dig out a crater. Hey, I'm Dylan from Dylan Investments. Money talks, I translate it for you. And today I want you to think less about being perfect with money and more about avoiding the handful of big traps that keep people stuck. If you can dodge or undo these, you don't have to be a genius investor or a budgeting robot. You just have to not play right into the hands of the banks, the apps, and the marketing teams that are really good at separating you from your paycheck. Let's start with one of the most common traps in your 20s, using your lifestyle as a scoreboard. You finally have a real paycheck. Maybe you're out of your parents' house. Maybe you graduated. Maybe you didn't, but you're out in the world. The temptation to look the part is everywhere. Slightly nicer apartment, slightly nicer car, the daily coffee, the drinks, the Ubers, the weekend trips. None of those things are evil. The problem is when your lifestyle quietly expands to match or beat your income every time you get a raise. I know a guy. His name is Alex. First job out of college, making around 45 grand a year. At first, he's living with roommates, driving his old beater, cooking at home a decent amount. Then he gets promoted. Boom, he's at 60. Suddenly, that one-bedroom apartment downtown feels deserved. The car that keeps having little issues gets swapped for a new car with a chunky payment. Nights out go from once in a while to 3 times a week. On paper, he's doing better. In his bank account, he has the exact same zero buffer he had at 45, just with nicer photos on Instagram. That's lifestyle creep, and it's one of the biggest money mistakes in your 20s. Here's where this gets interesting. The years where it feels like you're just getting started are actually the years with the most power. Every dollar you don't lock into permanent lifestyle in your 20s can work for you for decades. Every dollar you do lock and becomes a fixed bill you have to drag around behind you. So if you're in your 20s, one of the smartest moves you can make is to decide on a lifestyle you can comfortably afford, and then treat raises and bonuses like fuel for your future instead of excuses to inflate your present. That might look like keeping roommates a few extra years, living a little bit below what you technically qualify for in rent, or driving a car that's just fine instead of flashy. It doesn't look sexy on TikTok, but it gives you options that other people won't have. Now, let's talk about the mistake that quietly eats those options alive, treating high-interest debt like it's just a normal part of life. Credit cards, store cards, buy now, pay later, that little Affirm box at checkout, all of it. The system is designed to make you feel like you're just spreading out payments, being flexible. In reality, once those balances stick around, you're basically running a negative investment portfolio on yourself. 18, 24, 29% interest is brutal. I've got a friend, we'll call him Jason. Jason starts using a credit card in college. Nothing crazy at first. A couple nights out, some clothes, some stuff for his apartment. He tells himself he'll pay it off when he gets his first real job. Then life happens. There's a move, a security deposit, some unexpected car repairs, a couple trips he doesn't want to miss. By 26, he's carrying $4,000 on the card. The minimum payment doesn't look terrible, so he just kind of kicks it down the road. What he doesn't see is that at those interest rates, a huge chunk of every payment is just feeding the bank, not killing the debt. That $4,000 can easily turn to $5,000 or $6,000 over time, even while he's making payments. Here's the part most people never see. Your credit card company is not upset if you carry a balance. That's the business model. They'd love for you to revolve that debt for years. So if you're in your 20s and you're starting to see balances sticking around, I want you to mentally treat anything above say 10 or 12% interest like a five-alarm fire. That doesn't mean panic. It means you make a plan. Stop swiping that card for anything that isn't essential. Move as much spending as you can to a simple debit card or a low-interest option. Aim every spare dollar at the highest interest stuff first, even if it's only 10, 20, 50 bucks at a time. You're not just paying down a balance. You're buying back future freedom. Remember that sick feeling when you opened your bank app and everything felt like it was collapsing at once? This is the engine behind that feeling. High-interest debt plus no cushion equals constant background anxiety. Which brings us to the next big 20s money mistake, living with zero buffer and calling it normal. I'm talking about having no emergency fund at all. Every surprise comes straight out of this month's paycheck or onto the card. Flat tire? On the card. Dental bill? On the card. Last-minute flight for a family situation? Card. You might be handling each thing okay, but your stress stays permanently high. Let me tell you about one guy I know, Mike. He's working a decent warehouse job, making enough to pay his bills, go out, keep up. No savings, but also no major debt. One day, his car dies on the way to work. Not a cheap fix. He misses a couple shifts dealing with it, loses income, pays for the repair with a card, and because he's down on hours, he can't pay it off that month. That's how the slide starts. It wasn't stupidity, it was fragility. The problem wasn't the one event. It was that there was zero shock absorber. If you only remember one idea from this video, make it this one. Your first savings goal in your 20s is not some huge investment number. It's a small, boring cushion that keeps you from going backwards every time life sneezes. For some people, that first target might be $500. For others, $1,000. Eventually, a few months of bare-bones expenses. But it starts with something that fits your reality. Maybe that means putting $50 from each paycheck into a separate savings account you never touch unless it's a real emergency. Maybe it's 25. The amount matters less than the habit and the wall you're slowly building between life happened and I'm screwed again. Another quiet mistake in your 20s is ignoring how the system scores you. Your credit profile. You don't have to obsess over your credit score, but you absolutely should understand that in America, it's like an adult GPA that follows you around. It affects your car loan, your apartment application, sometimes even job opportunities. The tricky part is that the rules aren't obvious. People think it's about having zero credit or never using a card or closing old accounts. A lot of the time, those moves actually hurt you. So here's how I want you to think about it in plain English. The system cares about whether you pay on time, how much of your available credit you use, and how long you've been responsibly using it. That's it. So you stack the odds in your favor by doing a few simple things. Put at least one recurring bill on a credit card and set up automatic payment in full from your checking account. So you're building a history of on-time payments. Try not to run your cards close to the limit. If your total limit is $1,000 and you're regularly at $900, that looks risky, even if you pay on time. And unless there's a good reason, keep your oldest card open, even if you rarely use it, because age helps you. You don't have to play games with your credit. You just have to show the system you're boring and reliable. Boring is very profitable in this area. Now, let's talk about one of the most expensive myths of your 20s. I'll start investing later when I make more. On the surface, it sounds reasonable. You're just getting started. Money feels tight. Investing feels like something older, richer people do. But mathematically, your 20s are the most valuable years you'll ever have for investing. Not because of how much you put in, but because of how long it has to grow. Time is the multiplier. Imagine two people. Alex starts investing a couple $100 a month at 25 and stops at 35. Jason waits until 35, then invests the same amount every month until he's 45. Same contributions, just a different start date. By the time they're older, Alex, who invested earlier, usually ends up with way more money, even though he stopped a decade earlier. Why? Because those extra 10 years at the front gave his money more time to quietly compound. Your future wealth is heavily influenced by what you do in the decade when you feel too early to worry about it. The good news? You don't need to become a Wall Street trader or spend your nights analyzing charts. In your 20s, the simplest move is usually to put small amounts into broad, low-cost index funds, either through a retirement account like a 401k or an IRA, or even a taxable investment account if you've already handled debt and emergencies. An index fund is just a big basket of stocks. So instead of trying to pick winners, you're buying a slice of the whole market. Set it up to automatically pull money every month, even if it's only $50 or $100, and let time do its thing. Your job is consistency, not genius. Here's where things quietly go wrong for a lot of Americans in their 20s. They say yes to every adult expense without realizing how permanent some of those choices are. One of the biggest culprits is the car. You get approved for a new car loan. The dealer says it's only $450 a month, and it feels like a win. Then add insurance, gas, maintenance. That one choice can easily become $700, $800 a month in total car costs. For a lot of people in their 20s, that's the difference between having money left at the end of the month and constantly scrambling. Contrast two guys. David drives a reliable used car. Nothing fancy, maybe it's a little ugly, but it's paid off. He takes the difference between what a new car payment would be and what he actually spends, and he sends even part of that into savings and investments. Mike leases a brand new car because it felt like the right time, and he wanted to reward himself. Same income. 5 years later, David has no car payment and a growing investment account. Mike has upgraded his lease twice and still feels like there's never enough money. That's the trap. Cars are one of those decisions where the story you tell yourself, I deserve this, everyone does it, and the math you're actually living with don't line up. Housing in your 20s is another area where the story and the math collide. There's this quiet pressure that you're not really an adult unless you have your own place in a cool neighborhood with a cute interior that looks good on camera. So people lock themselves in a rent that eats 40, 50, even 60% of their take-home pay, and then they wonder why everything feels tight. A slightly older, slightly wiser version of you doesn't care that your first apartment was impressive. They care whether you're still stressed about every bill. To make this less abstract, imagine you're choosing between a place that costs $1,600 a month and one that's $1,100 if you share with a roommate or move a little farther out. Over a year, that's $6,000. Over a few years, that's the difference between I never have savings and I have a real emergency fund and a decent start on investments. In your 20s, it's often better to think in terms of margin than image. The more margin you build into your life, the more options you'll have later, like changing jobs without panicking, taking a career risk, or moving cities without going into debt. Now let's zoom in on something a lot of younger workers and gig workers mess up without realizing it. Taxes. You get your first real job, you see this big number on the offer letter, and then your first paycheck hits, and it's smaller. You're not necessarily doing anything wrong. That's just how withholding works. But if you pick up side gigs, freelance, or work as an independent contractor, the game changes. No one is automatically pulling taxes out for you. You get the full payment, it feels amazing, and it is very easy to forget that a chunk of that money isn't really yours. It belongs to the IRS in your state, and it's due later. I've seen this happen to Uber drivers, DoorDash drivers, freelance designers, all sorts of people. They hustle all year, use the money to survive and keep up, then tax season hits, and they get a bill for thousands of dollars they don't have. It feels like being punished for working hard. The mistake wasn't the work. It was treating all of that income like free and clear money. If you're in your 20s and you're doing any kind of independent work, one of the smartest habits you can build is skimming off a percentage of every payment into a separate tax and savings account you don't touch. Even if you overshoot and end up owing less, you've basically forced yourself to save. That's a win. On the other end of the spectrum, if you have a job that offers a 401k with a match and you're not taking advantage of it at all, that's another huge 20s money mistake. Employer match is one of the few places in finance where you get an instant guaranteed return. If your employer says, we'll match your contributions up to, say, 3%, and you contribute zero, you're just walking away from free money that future you could really use. I get it. Sometimes things are so tight that even 3% feels impossible. But if there's any way to slowly dial it up, even from 1%, then 2, you're building a habit and grabbing a benefit that a lot of people regret skipping in their 20s and 30s. Let's also talk about the shiny, risky stuff your 20s brain gets pitched as a fast lane. Day trading, meme stocks, random coins your coworker swears are the next big thing. Options, sports betting, casinos. The marketing, the screenshots, the hype, they all play on the same emotion. Everyone else is getting rich while you sit there doing nothing. In reality, most of the people getting hit are the ones chasing quick wins without understanding the risk. The people posting big wins rarely show you the months where they lost, panicked, or wiped out an account. Here's the twist. You don't have to completely avoid risk, and you don't have to never have fun. If you want a tiny, fun money bucket to gamble with or speculate in, that's your call. Just make it a small, clearly capped percentage of your money that you can truly afford to lose. The mistake is when your main financial plan becomes gambling. Your core money should be boring and reliable, paying down high-interest debt, building a buffer, and investing in diversified stuff over time. Then if you still want to take swings, you're doing it from a place of strength, not desperation. Another big mistake in your 20s is never actually learning the basics because you feel behind or ashamed. Maybe you grew up in a family that never talked about money, or they fought about it constantly. Maybe your parents made terrible financial decisions, or maybe they did everything for you and you never had to think about it. It's easy to carry those patterns forward without even noticing. You get a bill, you pay it. You get an offer, you sign it. You see a credit limit, you assume it's safe to spend. Money becomes this vague source of stress in the background instead of a system you understand and can work with. Here's where this gets hopeful. You're not supposed to magically know how all this works. The game is complicated on purpose, but you can learn enough to protect yourself way faster than you think. You don't need a degree. You need a few key mental models. Things like high-interest debt is an emergency. Time in a market beats timing the market. Large fixed payments, like cars and rent, control how trapped you feel. Some of your paycheck should be quietly buying freedom for future you, not just patching holes for present you. Those are the kinds of ideas that turn you from prey into an actual player in this system. Remember that moment at the beginning where you opened your bank app and felt your stomach drop. That feeling is usually a mix of two things: not liking the numbers you see and not feeling like you have any control over them. Everything we've talked about in this video is about clawing back that sense of control in your 20s. Not perfection, not getting everything right, just avoiding the landmines. Lifestyle that expands too fast, high-interest debt that lingers, zero emergency cushion, ignoring your credit, waiting too long to invest, locking yourself in a heavy car and housing costs, misunderstanding taxes, gambling instead of having a plan, and staying in the dark because you're embarrassed to ask questions. So what does this actually look like for you, sitting at your kitchen table right now? It might look like choosing roommates over a cool solo place for a few years so you can kill your debt and build savings. It might look like keeping your car humble and directing that extra $200 or $300 a month into an emergency fund until you hit your first goal. It might look like signing into your 401k portal and finally turning on contributions, even if it's a tiny number at first. It might look like opening a free credit monitoring app and actually checking your credit score instead of hiding from it. Here's where I'd start if I were you and your 20s feel messy. First, get clear on your true monthly obligations and your take-home pay. Not the offer letter number, the number that actually hits your account. Then, pick one big win to focus on for the next few months. Maybe it's paying off the card with the highest interest rate. Maybe it's building that first $500 in savings. Maybe it's dialing back your rent or car costs at the next possible chance. You don't have to fix everything at once. In fact, trying to usually backfires. You pick one lever, move it, then move the next. If this made some things click for you, do yourself a favor and save it. The next time your friends are talking about credit cards or rent or investing, you'll have language and ideas to work with instead of just vibes and marketing slogans. And if you want to go deeper, the natural next step is to learn exactly how to build that starter emergency fund or how to use credit cards without letting them use you. Those are topics I break down in other videos because once you're out of the most common 20s traps, you can actually start playing offense with your money. Your 20s don't have to be the decade where you ruin everything and fix it later. They could be the decade where you make a handful of unglamorous but powerful choices that set you up for the kind of 30s and 40s most people think are out of reach. You don't need to be perfect. You don't need to be the smartest person in the room. You just need to stop donating your future to other people's business models and start lining things up so your money quietly works for you in the background. I'm Dylan from Dylan Investments. Money talks, and I'll keep translating it for you. Have a good one, my friend.